Let me introduce you to my guest. It's Lubomir Dimitrov. Good morning.
Good morning.
And you're from Bulgaria, and you've got that lovely accent.
Yes, I'm born in Bulgaria, which is a country in Eastern Europe. It was before part of the Eastern Bloc, but now it's getting integrated into the European Union, and on 1st of January it becomes part of the European Union as well.
Well, I wish it will.
Yeah, it will. It's already been decided.
Well, I don't know about the result of joining it. It's been, sometimes there's a lot of change. So you go to the Euro and you do all sorts of other things.
Actually, I was in Bulgaria in the months of April, May and June, and I made a big... I wrote a paper of about 70 pages about the astrological chart of Bulgaria.
Did you?
Yes.
And what sign is that in?
On the Capricorn, actually.
Oh, well, that will be successful.
Bulgaria is really a very old country. It was established in 680, so it's have a more than 1,300 years history, and actually that got the interest of all the media over there, and it was very successful paper, which was presented on the third national conference of astrology in Bulgaria.
Now, you yourself are a Libran.
I am.
Do you have Capricorn rising or something?
No, I have Moon in Capricorn. How did you guess that?
Well, I knew because you
have you done astrology before?
Yeah, well, I've been looking at astrology since I was at school, so probably as long as you have, or perhaps a bit longer. But I didn't study it as a, I just go by,
by intuition.
Yeah, no, it's more about reading the energy. As I say, I can sense the earth sign in you. And when you started to talk about presenting papers,
yes,
and being utterly competent, and getting the the interest of the media, there's somebody on his road to success, and Capricorn's like that. So I knew you're a Libra, so I had to put the Capricorn in there, and of course yes, I would choose the ascendant first,
yes,
put the moon there.
I have 3 planets in Earth signs, okay? So
3 in Earth.
3 in Earth signs, actually 4, because Mars is also there. So I have 3 planets in Virgo.
So you're very grounded, yeah.
Yes, and 1 in Capricorn. Actually, this is one of the reasons why people don't believe in astrology very much, because they say, for example, I'm Libra or whatsoever, but when I read the description of my sign, it doesn't match. What happens here is the sun, which is determining your sun sign based on the month which you're born, may be in one sign, but you can have a whole bunch of planets in some other sign, which is neighboring, or maybe a little bit far away from this one. You can have different rising sign. The moon can be somewhere else. Yeah, Mercury can be somewhere else.
I look at it this way. You've got the main dish there, and then you put a sauce on, like Chateaubriand, could really change the flavour of a steak.
Exactly.
So if you might have a sun sign in Sagittarius, and then you might have another in the ascendant, and it will change the flavour.
Exactly. The difference between the sun sign and the rising sign is such that the sun sign is giving you your outer appearance, how you present yourself to other people. If I can give you an example with the car, if you look at the car, like for example, what is the model, what is the color of the car, what is the number plate, this is all the sun sign. So this is how we project ourselves to other people.
The outward appearance.
That's exactly right, the outer appearance. But if you open the bonnet and you inspect the engine, which is actually driving the car, that is your rising sign, and that can be quite different. And especially if you have planets close to the rising sign, for example, if you have 2 or 3 planets over there, you can be actually driven by completely different energy what is from your sun sign. That's why people have to actually look
at their personal...
And what about
the moon? The moon, how was that affected?
The difference between the sun sign and the moon sign is that the sun sign is conscious, while the moon sign is subconscious.
Right.
In other words, let's say, for example, if you have 100 people listening to a lecture, they all will behave according to their sun sign. The Capricorn will take notes. He will be very organized, okay, because Capricorns are the managers. He will take notes. He will pay attention. Somebody who is Aries maybe will get bored after 10-15 minutes. Somebody who is Sagittarius will look at the general picture, but it won't pay attention to the detail.
That's
right?
Yeah.
But let's say, for example, if a fire breaks in or an earthquake and they all have to escape immediately, they will all act according to their moon sign, not according to their sun sign, because the moon is the instinctive reaction to situation.
Right.
So let's say, for example, if something happens and they all have to escape, somebody who has the moon in Aries will decide that this is the right direction and just go there, just like the ram, and try to break the wall and escape over there. While, for example,
the Virgo will think about it first.
The Virgo will be very analytical.
He will examine all the exits and which window is locked.
Exactly.
And probably guide a few other people on the way out.
Exactly, that's right. And somebody who is Libran, for example, example, say, you go first, and I go
sweet.
after that. And somebody who is, for example, Pisces will be so overwhelmed by reaction, by
just sit and
emotions
sob.
that they may actually even burn in the process before they escape. So this is the difference between the sun and the moon, that the moon is actually the instinctive reaction to situation where we don't have time to think,
Right.
while the sun is actually our outer appearance, how we present ourselves to other people. That's why it's important that people actually have their personal charts done based on the time, the place, and the date of birth, so they know exactly all the planetary positions and all the angles they're making and all the houses and the rising sign, etc., etc. So that's why they have to. There are 3 ways to do your personal chart.
So I would just like to say that some people, like yours truly, have 3 in the same, so they're triple whatever. I actually thought I was Sagittarius with a Scorpio rising and a Capricorn moon.
Yeah.
And they said, no, I'm sorry, you're not. You're 3 in 1. You're just triple Sag. And the only other triple Sagittarian I know, you probably know her because that's Gillian.
Oh, yes.
Gillian Heathcott.
Mm-hmm.
And she's another triple Sag. So it gives us enormous energy. But as I say, too many elephants in the dining room.
Well, what happens when somebody has a strong emphasis on one sign is that the positive qualities of this sign become greatly emphasized. Like, for example, the positive about Sagittarius is they're very optimistic people. They look at the bigger picture. They actually move forward. The key word for Sagittarius is expansion of consciousness on every level. So that's why it's connected with people from foreign places. That's why you have invited me for your program, I presume. And for example, traveling as well.
We love to travel.
But at the same time, all the negative sides of that sign will be also greatly emphasized. Like, for example, Sagittarius doesn't want to pay attention to the small detail.
And slapdash.
And very often when they sign contracts, they don't pay attention to the small print, and that may lead to problems in the future. So every now and then, when we have, for example, a great emphasis on one sign, or as we call it, a traffic jam of planets in one sign, that means that everything good about this sign will be very, very important, very emphasized in the chart, but also everything negative will be also emphasized. So basically, it means that this sign has to be worked truly throughout the life of the person.
And isn't it interesting that in some families you get the congruence and the compatibility of signs that get on, and the others completely put the fire out because they cannot cope.
Actually, there are no coincidences.
This is what I'm saying. I chose a very difficult, and I'm sure my mother would say I was very difficult, but for what I had to learn,
yes,
it was this huge amount of expansive love, this huge humanitarian love that can go beyond the manipulative. Like they talk now about the indigos here to teach us love, and you cannot manipulate them. And I look at where I put myself and thought, my goodness, this is a tough one. But the older I get, the more centered in who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly coming to the West, I find this place just absolutely fits me. And the people here are wonderful in the West. I love them. And I thought, well, you have to back yourself in your own true spirit and then find the good sides of that. Because so often if people don't like you, it's because they don't see really who you are.
Well, first of all, you have to actually value and appreciate yourself.
Exactly.
So then other people can value and appreciate you. In my practice, I have noticed that 99% of the people do not have an objective appraisal of themselves. They either overestimate themselves or they underestimate themselves. Very few people can actually say what they really are based on their real potential in the chart. So that's why it is important that they see a professional astrologer, so they see exactly what their potential is. Like, for example, normally when I write a natal chart for a person, I write between 35 and 40 pages, a very detailed description of what everything positive about this person is outlined in their chart, and everything what is negative, what they have to work on. See, if, for example, we don't have our natal chart, we are like a small boat in the ocean, which are just taken by the tides. And the tides can be compared here with the planetary influences, right? If we don't have the information where the tides are taking us, then everything can be easily predicted, right? And the boat will be going in one direction or another depending on where the planets are actually taking you. But if you have a compass in your hand, which is actually the natal chart, You can actually see, you can study these influences, you can see where they're taking you. And if you don't like the direction in which they're taking you, you can actually counteract them. You can consciously use your vessels, so sort of move in a different direction. If you don't have your natal chart, if you don't have this outline, that it will be very easy to predict where you're going to end up. But if you use your free will based on what it is your real potential in the chart, then you can change certain events. Not everything is cast in stone. A lot of people think that astrology is basically all about predictions. This is not exactly true. It's most about self-knowledge.
Exactly.
Once you know yourself, then it's not so difficult to make predictions.
Yes, and also you find yourself sometimes in a position of being able to teach, whereas sometimes if you've been put on the back foot for a long time, you realise that you're not letting... And some lovely Sagittarian who lived up the road from me, she's put it this way, she said, oh no, if I get in such and such a position, she says, my bubble bursts.
Exactly.
And people, you know, if you are a fire sign, and an earth sign will continually throw earth on you, and you know, just put the fire out, so your bubble is definitely... And there is something, and I've often thought one of my favourite images is you know, when it rains and you've got a whole lot of leaves that are nasturtium leaves, and the raindrops fall in this lovely little round ball and they slide around like that. I have a great affinity for that image of that silver ball sliding around, and
Yes.
that is like the bubble. It's kind of a magic image for me.
Exactly.
We're going to go now to your second piece of music.
Okay.
And would you like to tell us what that is? It's track 3 on this one. Do you remember?
This is Jean-Michel Jarre.
Okay. Would you like to say that again?
Jean-Michel Jarre.
And?
And I think this is from his album.
Okay, now, before the break, we were talking about... Well, we did allude to, Lubomir, that you... Well, some people say you do choose the parents that you come in to do the work for if you're on this continual spiritual path that you... towards self-realisation and growth. And you say, from your point of view, from an astrologer's point of view, that it is indeed not an accident, that your family constellation is that which will afford you the most maximum growth in which area you need to find yourself. Is that...
That's right. Nothing actually is coincidental. So when we are born in a certain family, we actually choose our parents long before we actually are born. So if you examine the chart, especially the 4th astrological house, which is pertaining to the mother, and the opposite 10th astrological chart, which is pertaining to the father, we can see the predisposition of the child, how they're going to experience their parents. A lot of children are grown up in families where, for example, one parent or the other were dominant. And
very dominant.
Yes.
Particularly in the era where I was brought up, you know, born in the 40s, where the father was the leader of the household and the mother was superficially subservient but actually underneath quite manipulative.
That's right. But there are also other families, especially today, as the energies between the male and the female merge. A lot of people are grown up in families where the mother is very dominant and the father is subservient.
Exactly.
Okay, but that doesn't really matter. I mean, if you look at the chart, you will see that the child is born with a certain predisposition to experience his or her parents in such way. So when we say, for example, that the father was very dominant, that doesn't mean that the father was actually like that. It was actually the child who experienced the father to be like that, because this is clearly outlined in the chart. Let's
But
say,
I
for
might
example,
say the other children might experience the father like that as well.
But look, you
And
can
the-
have a
and the
family.
wife.
You can have a family of 3 or 4 brothers and sisters.
They all experience the father as dominant.
Not really. Not really.
Well, that's what I'm saying, that 9
Not
times out of
really. I
10
mean,
they do.
some of them may experience it this way. Some of
Okay.
them may not. For
Okay.
example, if you ask them, some of them can say that the childhood was very colorful, especially if they have Neptune in the 4th house or some
Okay.
planet like that. And some may say that the childhood was very tyrannic and despotic, right? So what I'm trying to say here is that, for example, if a child is born with a difficult planet in the 4th house of childhood upbringing, he will be by birth predisposed to experience his
few
parents
traumas.
this way. So even if, for example, the father once in the blue moon decides to take the child and just give him a hug or something like that, the child will behave in such way, if he has this planet in his natal chart, that the father, after some attempts, will say, okay, all right, just go on. And then the child will say, well, I knew it he's like that. You know what I mean? So basically we can say that it is a 50-50 relationship here. So the father could be really like that, or the mother, but the child is also predisposed to experience it this way. This is part of the learning program. If, for example, later on when they grow, they actually try to understand what happened in the childhood, they will see that this dominant parent was very important in their life because he was trying to give them exactly these values which they were trying to develop in themselves later on. So that was part of their learning program.
And my question that I brought up to you about being in a certain household as a child and learning lessons, one of the things that I've attempted to find is a very true, authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you go through life and you find that people are not being themselves. They're more interested in the appearances of things, where it's appearance over ethics. This is one of the things that has bugged me. And I thought, wow, hang on a minute. And if I try to get to somebody who's absolutely defended and in denial, what is the lesson I'm to learn there?
Well, part of the first, to overcome any problem, you have to acknowledge it, right? These people who do not acknowledge that there is a problem over there,
yes,
they cannot solve it, because they first of all have to acknowledge it, that it is there, so they
yes,
can fight with it. So that's why the natal chart is so important, so people can actually read it with an objective eye, and they can see, for example, all their real potential and all their real shortcomings, so they can work on them.
I think the answer to my question is, as my son says to me, quite, or used to so often, Mum, just let people be who they are.
This is actually very important.
And even if their self is not their true self, and you know it's not, and then you know that they're hiding and you'd like to meet them sometime,
you
or that
cannot shovel into people's
yes,
throats the truth if they're not
exactly,
ready for
yes,
this. For example, on Conscious Living Expo, which I'm going to be giving my readings over there,
yeah,
I have a stand, and a lot of people pass by, right?
Of course.
Some people stop, and some people want to have a reading, and some people just pass by because they're not ready to have a reading. I cannot go outside the aisle and
say,
actually drag them.
Excuse me, you need me.
Exactly, because that will have an opposite effect. Only people who are ready will stop, and they will learn what they need to learn. If, for example, somebody is not prepared for this, it actually will have the opposite effect if you drag them, and if you start to tell them, no, really, I have to give you an astrological reading, and you have to know this and this and that.
You know what it's like? When I was doing some circle dancing once, and I was the only one who was wrong, but I thought I was the only one that was right. That was how arrogant I was at the time, and nobody said anything. And it was so wonderful. They were all quietly doing their steps. And then I went, oh, just a minute, I think I'd better change that to that. And
Yes.
we all kept dancing, because circle dancing is like that. And I laughed, and they just quietly nodded and smiled, and I said, thank you very much.
Exactly.
It was so beautiful and quiet and gentle and subtle.
Exactly.
And I laughed at myself. It was beautiful.
Brother Strugatsky, these are Russian writers. I spent some time in Russia. I was a student over there for 5 years. They wrote a very interesting book, which is a science fiction, and it tells you how people, let's say, 3,000 years from now on, go on some distant planet, and they find over there people who are living in a very primitive society, right? Something like which we used to live here thousands of years ago. And so what they decide to do is they decide to actually educate them and put them in beautiful houses and give them all this technology and everything like that. And nevertheless, these people still like to live, all of them, in one room and fight in the evenings because their wife wasn't faithful, and have drink and have smoke, etc., etc. What that means is that basically if somebody hasn't risen to the energy which is appropriate for him, you
Yes.
cannot actually drag them to the happiness, right? They have to be ready for that.
Yeah.
Once they're ready, they will come themselves.
Okay. So when you say you're in this family of origin that is there to teach you lessons, sometimes it's... Well, one person who was in the spiritual realm said to me, you have a very bad mismatch between you and your mother. You know, you're at very different levels.
There is no such thing as a mismatch, all right?
Okay.
It may look very tense on the outside, but the reason why you have attracted this mother is purely because you had to learn certain lessons from her. Sometimes we have a karmic relationships with our parents.
Right.
Sometimes we have to resolve some karmic issues. And this is one of the things what I'm going to talk on conscious living, because my presentation on Saturday, November 11th, will be on past lives revealed by astrology. And in a lot of families, when they have a difficult relationship
Somebody said that to me once, that we were both men and we were really nasty to each other.
Exactly. So I mean, I don't know your child, I have to have a look at it, but the chances are, from what you're saying, is that you probably have been connected before, and there is some outstanding karma which has to be resolved. Not necessarily the karma always is negative. Some people are born in families with a very positive karma, but positive aspects and negative aspects are working exactly the same. They're both positive in such way that we're always learning. In one way, we're learning in harmonious aspects. In another way, we're learning in a disharmonious aspect. We cannot say what is positive, the day or the night. We cannot say what is more positive, man or woman. Everything is positive.
Okay, I'm going to call you Dimitri, but it's Lubomir. Lubomir, yes. Thank you very much indeed. And your lecture is on the Saturday, is it?
On Saturday, November 11th,
yeah.
From 2 o'clock till 4 o'clock. Can I just mention quickly as well, for those people who want to know more about astrology, they can log into my webpage, which is lubomir.name, lubomir.name, Name.
Okay, thank you very much for your time this morning. It's been very, very interesting.